So hi everyone, my name is Robert, and I am going to be talking about condoms, obviously. And I thought I would kind of talk about the story of how we even got into condoms and a little bit about the trials and tribulations that we've had over the last couple of years in this area. And so, like any good story, there's a narrator, and you can hear from my accent, I'm not Australian, I'm from the States. But for the past decade or so, I've worked across five continents now, in multiple countries at the interface of academia and industry. And I've tried to help take innovative concepts from the academic sense to new companies or new non-for-profits, or to actually get products out in the commercial space. And I've done so in a variety of roles. So as a researcher, a project manager, and at times an entrepreneur. Now, this is just a bumper sticker slide of a few of the places that I've been involved with. And so my story in Australia starts about 5 years ago, and relatedly it was for love. It was, my partner is Australian. And I was hired over at the Australian Institute for Innovative Materials, which is the building right over there, working as a researcher in bioprinting. And for those that don't know, bioprinting is an extension of 3D printing. 3D printing is where you have a virtual object that you have on a computer, and the software breaks it up into layer by layer. And then using a piece of equipment, either metal or plastic or in our case, biomaterials, you actually reprint it in real life. And so I was helping to bring in new bioprinters that were available commercially. We were pioneering some of the most advanced technology in Australia at the time. And we were also developing our own material, or our own printers, to do some kind of advanced technology. And so we were looking at a lot of materials that were very tissue-like and organ-like and whatnot, and we needed to do for the bioprinting side. So I wasn't into sex. I was into sex, but I was into sex as a researcher until basically this guy came along. And so if you don't know, that's Mr. Bill Gates. He's probably the most unlikely and unsexy advocate for safe sex across the planet. And you might be asking yourself again, why does Bill Gates care about safe sex? Or why does he care about condoms? And I actually don't think he does. The foundation cares about the impacts of what not using condoms happens. And so Melinda Gates had this quote recently, which I absolutely 100% agree with. Contraceptives are one of the greatest anti-poverty innovations in the world. And so we all know what the consequences of not using condoms are here. I mean, there's disease or unplanned pregnancies, and they're dramatic. There's no doubt about it. But when you go into the developing world, this is even more dramatic. I mean, it could be life-threatening. It could be life-ending. And what they're really looking at is the ability to space out families. I mean, it involves social economic mobility, it involves women's rights, it's whatnot. If you can space out families, there's better chances that both the mother, the baby, and the father will be healthier, and that you'll have this ability to have a better life and well-being. And so that's what the Gates Foundation was really looking for when they were calling for, a next generation condom. And so, what's wrong with condoms? Well, we all know that condoms just don't feel as good as the real thing. But imagine if there was a condom that you couldn't wait to put on, or that your partner was dying for you to wear. Could you make the experience even better than natural? Well, you'd be redefining what a condom should be, a pleasure-enhancing sexual aid. And at the same time, you would be saving healthcare agencies millions. You'd be avoiding disease, stopping unplanned pregnancies, and also disrupting a $6 billion business. And so we said that, this would be great, but how do you even try to attempt that? Well, back to the materials, we had something in our arsenal called tough hydrogels. And we proposed that you could replace latex with these tough hydrogels. Now, I'm actually wearing a tough hydrogel right now, not down there, but in terms of my contact lenses. And they're basically described as wet, squishy plastics that feel more like skin. They're very safe for sensitive areas of the body. Obviously, they're in my eyes right now. And they have a whole host of advantages. You can make them clear, which has a visual appeal. You can't do this with latex. There's no smells or tastes, which are actually some of the biggest turn-offs with condoms right now. No latex allergies. That's a big one for about 10% of the population. And the materials themselves have some interesting opportunities in terms of inherent lubrication and the ability to load drugs, and I'll get into some of that in a minute. But So we were using these for artificial organs and next generation bionics. We weren't using them for condoms. But we proposed to the foundation that, look, we think we have materials that could replace rubber. And we said to them we were going to do 4 things. First thing, prove that the materials could be mechanically suitable for condom use. So were they stretchy enough? Were they strong enough? Second thing, was it a biological barrier? We did know. It's got to stop sperm and pathogens from going through. Third, mass production. As was alluded to, this is a massive consumer good. It's a medical device. There was 27 billion condoms made and potentially used in 2015 alone. There's got to be mass production. You can't just do something in the lab. That's not going to suit. And most importantly, we were challenged with, could we use these materials to preserve or enhance pleasure? And we set this off to the Gates Foundation, and we got one of the grants. And so there were 1,700 applicants, and we were one of 20 in 2 rounds that actually got funded. And it was probably around the time when things were starting to go in the news. We got a lot of press. Doing the junket, it was quite an experience, and it was also a kind of an oh crap moment. We have to now deliver, and we don't know anything about condoms. So I mean, we knew a bit. We had a plan, but you know, it was a gamble. And so we borrowed from the most logical pathway forward in terms of condom development as a process. And we do this. This is what industry does. And so basically, you have a couple steps. There's R&D. It has materials validation, clinical validation, user validation, all sorts of kind of benchtop work, or you would say. And then there's kind of the scale-up manufacturing where you have to do material supply. You actually have to produce condoms, and there's companies that do all this. Quality assurance. So condoms are the only medical device that simultaneously stop or prevent against pregnancy and STIs. So there's a whole host of regulations, not only on their use, but on their production. And then we go into marketing and distribution. And that's how we see them usually, either on the shelves or given to us from the social health clinics. And behind every good plan is a good team, and we built an excellent one that combined a whole host of different multidisciplinary aspects. So we not only had engineers like myself, we had material scientists. We actually partnered with AIM. We partnered with the IMRI, with the Illawarra Health and Medical Research Association, with molecular biologists, microbiologists to look at the barrier studies. And we also partnered internally with CHI, the Center for Health Initiatives, to look at kind of the social engagement side. And we complemented this actually with external collaborators as well, particularly at Swinburne University, mainly in innovation-driven design, industrial engineering, and in strategic foresight. And so we had this really great team, a suite of good advisors with decades of experience in developing research for healthcare. And then we got at it. And we had about a year and a bit. We had 100 grand. Usually takes about $10 million to do this process. And we sought new funding. We were luckily supported by UOW Global Challenges. And like I said, we got to it. And so I promise there's only going to be a few slides on any technical stuff here. I'll keep it very high level. Happy to take questions on this later. And I'll give you the take-home messages. So try to keep it simple. So the first step, so hydrogels, there's a wide range of these materials. It's everything from the jelly you eat to these contact lenses. Lots of different properties, lots of different variations, lots of different chemical structures that you can start with. We kind of had to shrink that down to a manageable arsenal. And so what we did is we took kind of what we thought would be the best candidates in terms of paralleling properties like rubber, and we started putting them through the testing regime that normal condom materials are tested against. They basically pull these materials apart, they take little samples, they look at tensile testing, they look at some other things as well. And what we found was there was a suitable amount of candidates that actually fit a behavioral profile like latex. So they didn't act exactly the same, but they acted similarly. They gave us a good indication that, okay, these materials act like rubber, or they could act like rubber. We also did some other interesting tests, like look at the coefficient of friction. So lubricants and lubrication is a key part of condoms and sex. And we found that the hydrogels are actually, compared to unlubricated latex, they have a lower coefficient of friction. meaning that they're a bit more slippery if you're just taking the base materials. And we're not saying you can get over the need to use lubrication in condoms, but from a starting platform, it's a pretty interesting, attribute. So we then had to do the biotesting. We had these, now we'd shrunk the arsenal. We had to prove, was it an effective barrier? And how they do this, again, we borrowed from industry. There's an ISO standard based on a bacteriophage. And now bacteriophage is it's a very small viral particle that will invade bacteria, okay? And the bacteriophage in question that they use is about 3 times smaller than HIV. So it's a model system that's used versus pathogens, and it's very much smaller than sperm. And they look at, it's a diffusion test. So you take your material, you load up your bacteriophage in a solution on one side, and you sample on the other side. And if there's any holes in the material, or if it can pass through just natively, you'll see it. And so we did these tests, not knowing what was going to happen. If you know about hydrogels, they're actually touted as being kind of the ability to deliver certain particles. So it was interesting. We found it was a barrier. It passed the test. So again, thumbs up, we're looking good. But we also wanted to see, was there a lower limit to this? So this is a new material again. Latex is completely different, completely different class. And so once you get down to the level of very small molecules, so on the size of pharmaceutical agents, it actually allows passage through the hydrogel. So what that means is potentially this could be, again, a platform to allow drug transfer. So an anti-STI, or a Viagra-like agent, or a flavor ester, or mint essence and pepper essence, which is how you get heating and cooling in normal lubricants and everything else. It's another interesting thing I found in the project. And what we did is we actually tested this. So we took an off-the-counter or off-the-shelf anti-HIV retroviral, put it into the material, and saw that it passed through. So we proved that you can actually use pharmaceutical agents in there. Not saying we're going to go that direction, but again, it's changing the paradigm. You're not stuck with latex as your base material. So then we looked at manufacturing, again, scale up. In this case, so we had these small little squares of stuff that we were playing around with. We had to get real. We had to get into condoms. So we created a simple batch prototyping system in the lab over there, which is glass tubes that go in and out in terms of the polymer. If you look online, you can see some condom manufacturing videos. It's actually very similar. So they have glass mandibles that get dipped through the latex, and then they get heated and rolled and whatnot. So we created a pseudo system over in the labs. And then we really said, okay, look, we could test these in-house, but that's not enough. So we partnered with a company called Enersol, which is the leading quality assurance agency for testing condoms and gloves and all sorts of latex medical products in Australia. It's in the suburb of Sydney. There's a little house there that's actually a factory that tests condoms. Pretty interesting. And we wanted to know 2 things, so from working with them. We said, we have a new material. There are these requirements for condoms in terms of testing parameters, international standards, on how to actually test condoms. Can our materials be used on the same testing equipment? And so our first approach was just put them on the machines. And a lot of these things, they blow them up. And so you might ask yourself, why? I mean, it tells you if there are leaks, but it also tells you about the production. So they're looking at batches of these condoms and saying, how much air? There's a limit of, whatever it is, 20 liters or whatnot. And you can actually see that from batch to batch, if there's variation, you can then in turn see about the production quality. And they get rated, and if they pass, then they get sold on the shelves or sent into the sexual health clinics. So we started blowing condoms up, and it worked. So big tick, we could use the same equipment that was out there. Then we also wanted to see, well, we have a new material. What does this behavior look like? Can we actually pass it through clearance, potentially? And what we found is that even with our limited use of a batch testing apparatus in the lab, we created condoms that when you did the test, they actually fit in between the standards of 2 current condom materials that are approved. So between polyurethane and latex. So even though we don't have to fit in these standards, we do. And so what that indicated to us, gave us good evidence to say, if you wanted to go down this route, if you wanted to produce a condom and get it tested, you would be able to do it on the same equipment that normal condoms are tested on, and that you could create a standard either based on existing materials or its own materials. And we did some also in-house testing as well on the bio side. So we did that bacteriophage test again, but we pressurized one side of it and did some sampling. It's another ISO standard, but basically, it worked. So we're at the stage and we're feeling good. We've spent a whole bunch of time. We've engaged with industry. We're patting ourselves on the back as engineers and scientists and whatnot. So like, we did it. And then it was, okay, preference, feel, all that sort of stuff. I'm like, oh, crap, again, how do we do this? This is way out of our expertise. What is the ethics clearance needed for this? How do you start to test? And we weren't at the stage of, like, you can put this on and try it and test it. I mean, these are experimental, procedures and materials, and there's all sorts of, it's ethics clearance, but there's also safety issues and everything else. And would it even tell us at that point if there could be a behavioral change? No idea. So this is really where Swinburne came in and assisted us, and we came up with some very interesting experiments and evidence around this. So we teamed up with a leading neuro marketing expert, and Joe down at Swinburne, he gets commissioned by companies that have a new product or a new advertisement, and they want to see your emotional attachment to what's going on, what you're seeing or feeling. And we looked at, could there be a test that you could actually feel the materials, just by hand, and actually identify if there was an association in your thinking, a behavioral response and whatnot. And so he looked around, he thought, this is interesting, never worked with condoms before, let's look at this. And there's actually only a few tests that do this. And we used a model, they've never done it with these materials, but they used a model that was also based on, it was chocolate and car seats. So, why chocolate and car seats? Luxury items that the texture can actually influence your decision to purchase. So they have a lot of money to spend, they do a lot of work on this so that you feel it and you're like, yeah, it's great, I'm buying it. And so we set up a new test, and this is groundbreaking neuroscience. This is absolutely new about feeling these materials, and we saw two very interesting responses. So if you compare touching latex versus these hydrogels, two things happen. The first thing is it's called apologies, my mind's blanking, a novelty response. And the way I can explain this is like, a balloon is a balloon is a balloon. We all know what latex feels like. Or your brain knows what latex feels like. And so when you touch a balloon or a latex condom, you can identify it. When you touch these hydrogel materials, you actually your brain doesn't quite know what you're feeling. So we don't know if that's good or bad, but at least it's something different, okay? So the second thing, which is more important, is when you touch these materials, you actually elicit a response in the brain that's associated with emotion, and at times associated with pleasure. And so, this was fantastic. We can't say for certain that it's a direct link, but when you touch these materials, in the beginning, there was only a few of these people that were going through. But then we got, 10, 20, 50 statistically relevant numbers to go through, and everyone was showing the same, response. We knew we had something. So, really interesting. It's a good substitute. We don't, for, at the time, how we could say, preference, or at least feel that you would like this. One other note about this happens in half a second. So before I can ask you and you can tell me if you like it or not, your brain is telling me something. So again, very interesting stuff, groundbreaking neuroscience. We don't know exactly what it means, but it's pretty cool. We're moving on with it. And then we also did some standard gauging acceptance trials. So this was basically looking at texture and appearance, feel and whatnot. And we had recent migrants from Africa, so students, come on board and actually feel these materials. Not a huge sample size, but the outcome of this was that from all these parameters, there was a more positive experience with the condom or the hydrogel condoms versus latex. Now again, they're just feeling this by hand. Nobody was like, these are fantastic. I'm taking this home and going at it. It was, but it was better than latex. So it was a start. Again, more evidence. And then, so we also complemented this. We had a good amount of evidence, but we needed to actually have, we wanted to be holistic about this. So, kind of taking a step back, condoms are a very unique medical device because they're a consumer product. You choose whether to use them or not. 27 billion condoms around the globe. Now, how you choose is really not about feel. You choose based on the association with the brand or the packaging or the messaging that comes about. And condom companies know this. This is where most of the money is actually spent. And so knowing that, and knowing that we were creating potentially a disruptive technology that was going to replace latex, we needed to understand how one might brand it, what the messages might be. And we weren't trying to say that we're going to do it, but we knew that it was important. So Swinburne, who are experts in this, did two very interesting projects. We collected condoms from around the world and about 50 countries and started to analyze the pictures and everything on it. You could do this really interesting composite where you put all of them on one and you can image the perfect condom. And basically we just learned a lot that, and a lot of this is known, but we kind of got some more further insights. Different countries, different demographics, different people respond to different things. So there's a German in the audience back there. Yeah, so you're more likely in terms of the branding to look for gold and black and safety. So the German condoms are very, a lot of them. Any Brazilians in the audience? No? Or Brazilian, a lot of those condoms, it's about sex, it's about pleasure, carnival, all that sort of stuff. So the messages are completely different. And so it just gives us an indication that this is more, even though we're on the technical side, we need to be aware of this if this is going to go forward. So we also did a international design competition. And so we got applicants from Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, so these were critical areas of interest for the Gates Foundation, to tell us how they would potentially brand some of this. And the applicants, some of the responses were amazing. You'd be paying tens of thousands of dollars to brand agencies to get the equivalent of some of this. And again, we just learned that, and I guess more appreciated, that this, particularly for the Gates Foundation, who has an interest in Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, the solution may be very targeted to specific demographics in these areas. And we need to understand what the culture and the messages and everything else is in those areas if this is going to work. This can't be here's a solution, we got it, it worked. It's got to be co-creation. It's got to be user-driven design. And so we packed that all up. So we've found a good strength. We've showed safety. We showed a preference a bit, or attraction to this, and engagement with the communities of interest, and a bit on productization, and we pitched again to Gates. So we came out, it's about 2 years later, and we could go for round 2. So they have an opportunity for the phase 1 awardees to go for round 2, $1 million. Around the question, can changing a condom material create a positive behavioral change? So we had all this really great evidence in the bench, or in the lab and everything. And the mission now, so we were successful as well. This happened last year. We spent the last 6 to 8 months, cheers, going, yeah, thank you. I should say, through it all, and this was through the support of UOW Knowledge, we were one of 2, I believe, grants that actually went forward. So out of that 1,700 original, about 20 or 30 that got put up, we were one of 2. So it's a testament to the great resources and everything else that is at UOW and the forward thinking and whatnot. But the next step in the project is really going from the benchtop to the bedroom. And so we have to have people, or we are now going towards having actual user trials in a location in Africa by the end of next year. So that's the mission, and this is what keeps me up at night, trying to figure out exactly how to do this. And we have a plan. We're getting there. We will do it. So our next steps involve three key activities. So the first thing is trial planning. So there's a lot more that goes on in a user trial than just having condoms ready to go and go forward. I just got back from Africa. I was in Kenya at a contraception design workshop, and we were talking to people on the ground, so local organizations that can actually help us do these trials. And we're trying to merge their expertise with some expertise in Australia in order to actually achieve this. There's questions about who's going to be the demographic, where are these trials going to take place, how are you going to assess data, all this sort of thing. This is beyond us, and it really isn't it shouldn't be us trying to impose this on the local culture. So it's understand these institutes, and it's sex. I mean, this is a very private and personal experience. There's a whole host of trust that also is involved with it. So even in organizations that are assessing this, these organizations have decades of work with the UN, with others, and actually are trying to achieve good goals. So we're working with them. And we have a few ideas about how this would go forward, and it's probably going to take another 6 months to a year to actually plan this out. Now, in parallel, we need to do pilot production. So that dipping rig over in AIM is not going to be efficient enough for a trial. I wouldn't use it. And I need to be, that's I guess the check. If I would use it, then we're going to go. So we've commissioned a plan with a partner company, a design firm who's familiar in the space, to create a rig that does not only the dipping, but the rolling, the lubrication, the packaging and whatnot, and critically puts the quality assurance across that whole production space in order to go forward. And so we're not talking about lots of condoms. It might only be a couple hundred or whatnot for a trial, but it needs to be done in a way where safety is priority number one, and that it would be what it would take to actually get a condom in the market, or it would adhere to the standards of current offerings on the market for condoms right now. And the preference studies. So this is, again, there are questions. So along with the production, even when you do these trials, normally, there's kind of a standard procedure that goes forward. But because this is a medical device, it's usually based on things like slippage, breakage, irritation. And there's a bit of preference in there, but we're actually concerned, and the Gates Foundation is concerned, and others are concerned, that if you do this trial in the normal way, are you really going to get the data you want? Are you going to say that there's actually a behavioral change? That somebody will use a hydrogel condom more than a latex condom? Or somebody will use a condom if it's a hydrogel condom versus saying, no, I don't like it. And so we're not confident that those standard policy or those standard practices actually are up to the challenge. So we're creating some of these additional studies that we want to complement the trials in order to get that data. It's all about just having that user validation. So that includes some of the neuromonitoring. That includes a recent addition with a medical anthropologist from CHI with tools that look at relationships and sex and whatnot in high priority groups. And the plan is to have those organizations in Africa help us to actually get the trials planned. We have the equipment being designed with the research that's going on here in terms of actually getting condoms ready for the trial. And by the time it's all ready to go, we'll have the way to assess it, which will happen with independent experts and ourselves in order to get that data. And again, it requires a really strong team. So there's been people that have come and gone and are now advisors, and we've added a few more experts. And we've absolutely gone where we weren't experts or we didn't know information, we went externally. We didn't try to do it internally without having an expert opinion on it or a procedure or policy. I mean, it is a product, and we're only relevant if we're doing it in that way. So the organizations you see on the right are our partners, and they're helping us actually achieve this goal. And so, I always get this question. And there's a few researchers that they like to ask me every day. I say, oh, well, because I'll do it for science. My girlfriend would be okay with that, And it's a tough question to answer, but we are actively trying to do this as rapidly as possible. However, safety is number one. That's how we have to go forward. So we are using these industry guidelines, we are using clinical experts and our own resources to make this happen. But it's probably a few years off. But along those lines, we've actually come pretty far in some ways. In some ways, we're still off. Remember that diagram in the beginning, that circle of development? We're still in the R&D stage. And I say that because we don't have user validation yet. User validation is the key aspect to justify investment going forward and to do mass production. So once we get this user validation, you go for scalable manufacturing. So instead of a couple hundred, you're talking about 100,000 at a time. And then clinical validation, we're doing user trials to assess preference, but you'll need to do actual clinical trials to then go into the market. So these are, again, required. It's slippage, irritation, breakage, a few other things. And then application for market entry. And how this would actually go on is, well, could that happen in Australia? Could it happen in Europe? Would it be in the US? Would it be in a country in Africa? Who knows? Could it be done in parallel? So each country has a similar process for assessing this, but you have to adhere to those countries' conditions to actually go forward. And so, along with this is it's a huge financial exercise as well. What we've done is we've secured funding we think we have a minimum viable product right now, and we're testing that in our user trials. This takes us through to the end of 2018. In the meantime, we're actively applying for and seeking new funding to support us to get over, they call it the valley of death. So to go from real kind of benchtop R&D or whatnot to real scalable manufacturing. That funding, so a couple more million, we'd be able to do pilot facilities, so to do that scalable production, get the clinical data, go through, or set the stage to get through regulation clearance. And then we're looking at some licensing models or partnerships that you would then go on and actually, UOW is not going to be a condom factory. So somebody has to do this, right? And Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation, they don't want to do it. We've asked them. So somebody's going to have to take this on. So whether it's us or whether it's a commercial partner already, we're building those relationships to actually set the stage for that. And you could, look, if everything went perfectly, you could feasibly say that potentially in 2020, you guys would be able to use these. So the user, the test users maybe next year, you're probably looking at minimum 2020. But in terms of a process, and in terms of normally like a $10 million development timeline or a development cost in potentially 10 years, we've done extremely well. So it's kudos to the team. I'm just a representative of them. It's really their hard work that has got us here. And so I thought I'd end some of this talk to just say we've talked about some of these technical challenges. We've also talked about, I guess, the preference, the personal challenges. There's a huge financial challenge as well. And if you look at condoms and why we're even in this, why even Bill Gates was concerned about this, there's been very little innovation in this space in almost 50 years. So similar materials that were used about 10 years ago or 20 years ago are still used today. And why that is because, in my opinion, condoms it's a product where you get small margins on returns. So these are like cents on a dollar. And so you have to be producing a ton, and you have to be able to have large market shares to justify having a company around this. And there are big companies that do this. They're mainly situated in the developed world. They're in even Australia was one of the biggest ones, and so until recently. What this has maybe limited is looking at other customer segments. So those in other countries, which are justifiable to really be true customers, or even different customer demographics, where condoms don't actually exist for them. It's limited any kind of innovation in that area to actually get to the market and get otherwise. So I always have to commend the Gates Foundation because they changed the picture. If it wasn't for them, I think we'd actually be staying with latex. But now we have 1,700 ideas that were at least kind of thought about. And some of those ideas will actually get into the market in some way, shape, or form because they became a new player, because they incentivized new investment and new research, new otherwise. And what we're trying to do is actually build a business model that blends the two or bridges the two. So we see it as, if these condoms did come out, there's got to be a way of servicing the developed world, where there's premium condoms sold on the shelf or given to you in social health clinics, but also incentivizing market development in the developing world. So the ability, because there are huge markets, there's huge populations, but there's a typical avenue is buy in bulk, send over and educate. We want to disrupt that model. We think it's co-creation, local solutions, maybe personalized condoms in some ways. So look, that concludes when I talk about condoms. I wanted to spend just a couple minutes on iAccelerate, just because I'm here. I'll keep it brief, and then we can go over questions. So, as mentioned, I'm the first researcher in residence at iAccelerate. This building's only about a year old, but iAccelerate has been around for a couple years. As we said, about 60 companies that have gone through. And look, as alumni and students and whatnot, you have a lot of ways of engaging with the incubator accelerator. And the purpose of this building is actually to encourage new ideas to actually be tested. You know, are they viable business opportunities? Are they viable investment opportunities, whatnot? And there are programs in these buildings that actually go and show you how to do that. So as not only just UOW alumni or whatnot, but as the wider community, you know, you're welcome to come in and apply. There's information about how to do this. We now have seed funds. So there's $10 million there waiting for new innovative ideas. And we're waiting for you guys to come in and approach us and actually apply and go forward. So I'm here, my purpose here is to link, or I serve a purpose to link entrepreneurial staff with the programs, but also companies with researchers around campus, because there's a lot of opportunities for funding if you bridge the two. If you got an academic partner and an industry partner, you usually can get some startup funding. But we're also, I've had experience in incubators across the world. We're also trying to be a bit different. So we have a particular focus in social good and in impact investing. And as part of that, we're actually trying to start a social or an impact investing fund. We're looking for notable alumni to actually become angels involved in that. But we are hosting a workshop and a conference in August. And Mr. Al Gore is going to somewhat, I don't know if he's going to make a personal appearance, but he'll be involved in some way. But there's a lot of talk about this impact investing. This is really about non-for-profits or for-profit models which aren't necessarily looking for financial return as the major milestone. So things like community well-being or personal well-being, you know, environment, aged care, even down to shark spotting. It's all about community. And at this conference, there'll actually be workshops with people who've not only just led companies, but led movements across the world, and one-on-one sessions, so that you can actually, if you have an idea and you want to look at how to take this forward, it's open. So there's more information about that up front. And last pitch to you guys is, I'm going to say that I'm also an alumni. So I recently graduated with an MBA from the Sydney Business School last year. So I think we are some of the, it's probably the major untapped resource in the Illawarra. There's a great amount of expertise, but also, and local jobs, but also passion about making the Illawarra better, and, you know, improving not only just kind of downturns in manufacturing, but taking us into the next generation and improving healthcare and well-being for everyone around. And so I'm going to propose, that I've been talking a bit this forward, is that one way of potentially doing this is working with iAccelerate with an innovation fund. And so one of these things, I was thinking something small. We do a lot of UOW pitches and whatnot, where we give small, or iAccelerate pitches, there's small pots of money to actually get some really good ideas off the ground. And I think the alumni should be able to not only participate in that, but also have a seat at the table to decide what type of innovation they want to see. Because their investment, and I think you should invest more with the university, but just this one specifically, you should be able to say, we're going to direct this. The alumni are going to help make this happen. And so, look, it's just an opportunity, and I'm happy to talk about that as well in this or afterwards. My office is downstairs. And with that, I'll say, look, thank you guys for listening, and I'm happy to take questions. So the question was about, I guess, the environmental impacts
Yeah.
Yeah, and biodegradability.
Yes.
So potentially yes. So hydrogel, I mean, we all don't like to see latex on the ground afterwards, and it doesn't degrade. I mean, you have to throw it away. And there are problems with even recycling latex. So there potentially is a way that this would be more environmentally friendly. However, we are still doing lifetime tests. So we don't know what that period is and what it might look like. But absolutely, there are other hydrogels that are absolutely biodegradable and have limited impact on the environment. Yeah. Look, the cost one's easy. Well, not easy, but to be a viable solution, we need to be within the similar cost of what is already available. And so we've actually done pricing, cost-benefit analysis, everything else, and it looks like these materials can actually be, or condoms can be produced at the same cost as normal condoms are right now. Now, saying that in the beginning there might be a small premium, because the only reason that condoms are so cheap is because there's supply chains that are across the world and there's multiple suppliers and you know it's a bidding frenzy. But saying that, I actually think that these could potentially become cheaper. And so the reason being, latex is, there's a variable cost that is related to the human factor of, well, it's a commodity. So you have trees, and you have a lot of people that are doing the production around that. And that gets absorbed into the production. With the synthetic form, you can actually disrupt that. So you could have a factory totally disconnected from basically Thailand and Malaysia, where all of the rubber trees are, and set it up in a location and actually create condoms on site and on demand. So there may be a way of actually reducing the overall costs, the cost of goods sold, whatnot, and going forward. Now, how that will affect consumer aspects, I don't think we're going to see them getting any cheaper. But from an investment standpoint, you get that question every day. And it's because, particularly from the social goods side or the social health side, they are choosing which condoms they buy based on being able to buy in bulk. Not necessarily about their effectiveness. So, yeah, but you have to justify to them that it's around the same. The second question, how much time do you got? But it's good. And the second question was about, basically, if I can paraphrase, how did we know what to do, particularly with engagement with industry and otherwise, when it was out of our expertise? I would say maybe two things. One, asking around who the experts are and listening and finding out when, for instance, Enersol, when we started talking to them, we got a lot of engagement from all the press. But when you start talking to the condom factories, you're like, you know John? And they're like, oh, you know John. Great. So that kind of, oh, I thought he was just a condom tester. Like, no, that guy helped develop the standards that all condoms are actually built from. So knowing or listening to who the experts are, not trying to be the expert, and trust. So trust in the team and trust in the process. And trust that you don't know the answer right away. But we still don't know in a lot of these. And it does keep me up at night. There's risk and everything else. But I trust the team and I trust the people and I trust the process that we will get to an answer. And this may be a failure. It may not work. But I know that we will definitively decide that we will know at the end that we've done everything possible to make sure it worked. So, yeah. Trust and expertise. I'll say just one other thing. Be the dumbest person in the room. Somebody said that to me and I love it. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So I try to go into and be outside my expertise all the time.
Hi. I was just wondering about the current shelf life of condoms in distribution in bulk are actually already beyond your timeline. They're sitting at about 2021 in latex. Have you got a forecasted shelf life currently for a compounded form?
We don't. No, this is a key concern. We are working with the engineering firm to set up trials for this. So that will relate to lubricants and packaging as well. And so, I mean, we have some indications that they will be within 2 to 3 years or more, which is kind of a typical latex. But this product may have a shorter shelf life. It just might be that it doesn't last as long. Or
I thought the standards has a minimum of 2 years.
It could be. Let's say
maximum of 5.
yeah.
It's actual life. It's real life testing.
Mm.
So it's got to be a product made that's sitting on a shelf for 2 years minimum before you pass the standard test.
Look, I'm not the complete expert in this, but from what I do know, there is accelerating testing equipment that can simulate a 2-year time period, or a 3-year time period, or 4-year time period under different conditions, and that can be used in order to pass regulations to get into market. Now, don't quote me on that. This is what, again, outside of my expertise, but I understand the point of well, you have to prove that there is some sort of shelf life. So again, part of our work right now, when I say like getting onto the market in 2020, that's beyond the life of the Gates Foundation project, or this current project. So there would be new investment, there would be new partnerships, and this would be working with companies that have all of the expertise to do this. So I'm optimistic 2020 that could push out a year or two, or more.
Got 2 questions, if that's all right. First one, if this does become a commercial product, would there be a sense that some of the funds coming back from that would help support future innovation through the UOW?
Yeah, so the question was about how to redirect potentially revenues or something else back to UOW to do further research. Absolutely. So as part of the model that we're looking at, again, some entity has to be responsible for licensing or distributing the technology, but the returns from that would absolutely be used. We have the resources here, and otherwise, to prove or to develop new aspects of condoms. So why wouldn't you use it? We don't want to have to redirect, we shouldn't have to develop a whole new, or buy a whole new factory, or buy a whole new testing lab. Those facilities exist. The people are here.
Wonderful, wonderful. So the other question was a little bit out of left field. As you were talking about the idea that the drugs can go through the condom, I thought of people who end up being drug mules, and they're often not in that position by their own choice or free will. So is there an ethical impact on these people?
Yeah, so what I should have, yes, and that has actually come up multiple times. So we're not putting drugs in and trying to...
No, but other people might use them to transport drugs, like...
Probably have to have a warning or something. Don't do this. Yeah, and I don't... So, look, it's something we haven't thought about, and it's probably something we should, because condoms are used for everything from, actually microphones on at concerts, otherwise. So there's kind of... it was standard in, I think, in Vietnam that they were on the top of protecting ammunition and things like that. So there's other uses for them. I don't think that they're, officially sanctioned for that. But probably more related to that side, going to a drug, adding any compound to a condom changes it from a class 2 medical device to a class 3 medical device, which is a whole nother level of regulation and whatnot. And so there are some examples of class 3 condoms on the market for anti-HIV and whatnot, and also for vasodilation, so to enhance sensation. But that is, I wouldn't say that would be a first product, and that would be wholly dependent on who your subsection of where your customers are, and it's a whole host of investment. It's just probably beyond what we would want to do, but as a platform technology, it is.
Maybe one more. Sorry. Two more.
Cool. So you were one of 2 for round 2 funding. I guess the question is, what's your competitors up to?
Yeah. So the question is how we were 1 of 2 funded from the Gates Foundation. What are the competitors up to? And I'm not completely sure. There's a little bit of ambiguity about who, but I know there's only a few. I do know that there was an investment in India for a graphene enhanced condom. So they were actually taking latex and trying to... So graphene is, for those who don't know, novel nanomaterial that's basically carbon at a single atomic layer thickness. And it's more stronger than diamond, it's more flexible than nanomaterial, it's more conductive than copper, it's magical, got the Nobel Prize in 2010. Very overhyped, but it's also a very good material. I'm in a company in graphene, so I can say that, yeah. But they're trying to enhance the properties of latex. They actually were one of 2 proposals that got funded that had graphene in condoms. And their point of this is graphene is also a very good heat conductor. And could you, by adding this material, actually help with the transfer of heat, which is another, like it's one of the reasons that people don't use condoms. So this is, by no means this is a solution to everything. There was a lot of applications that were ranging from applicators to branding to otherwise, and with the mission of trying to get more people to use condoms. They weren't just funding new materials. There were other hydrogel ones funded as well. Yeah, look, I've talked with most of the big companies and a lot of the smaller ones, and it seems like there's just generally an interest in new materials, more skin-like materials, more sensation-enhancing materials, but not a lot of internal resources to do the R&D, or not an appetite to do it. So they rather would see something actually further down the line of development and not have to do that. So they're scouting around. I mean, they talk to everyone who the Gates funded. You know, we heard reports of that. But I think what they're, in my discussions with them, they're looking for that user validation. They love all this stuff. It's great. Has anyone used it? Has anyone reported that they like it? When you have that, let's come back and talk. So from an industry perspective and a reality perspective on a commercial product, and these people have, I mean, you know, it's billions that are in this extensive market, shelf space, everything else. I mean, that's how they make money. They're looking for the next innovation, but the field hasn't changed so much. It's more about the brands. The money goes into the brands. But if something happened, if you could get something, not just this or you know, otherwise, if you can get an innovation to a next level, you know, they're paying attention. And it's, those big brands are, I mean, they have an existing market. They're in a lot of, in times in the premium space. We're also interested in more of the social good space, the sexual health clinics and whatnot. There are different companies that serve them, and also, which are fantastic. And those that are also working in Africa and others, and are not necessarily generated by profits from stakeholders. There's no problem with that, but there's multiple companies where this technology might be able to go into. And I would like it to be for everyone, not just for one. It shouldn't just be for people who can pay. And I don't think Gates Foundation would like that either, so we're on that level. So, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Robert. That was really fascinating. And I mean, even just talking through the whole process of what's involved in getting something from the research through to the manufacturing stage is really, really impressive. And that's what the Innovation Campus is designed to do. So it's great. I'd like Melba to present a gift, if that's okay.
It's the best part. I get the best presents.
Just thank you. So Robert's generously donated his time tonight to help share the message, and so thank you very much. You're on video. Thanks, Robert. And we've got this terrific space for the next half an hour or so. So Bill and James are going to continue with some drinks and food, and I'm sure Robert's happy to continue the conversation, and anyone who has a burning question, come and speak to him. The great thing about this series is we have so many amazing researchers and research going on at the university, and it's a great opportunity to be able to share some of that. If you're interested in learning more about any particular area, then you can contact us at the Alumni Division, and we can put you in contact with the relevant areas. There's an array of research going on, and as Robert was saying, our alumni themselves are untapped resource, you know, knowledge. It's all about knowledge sharing, and that's what we're hoping to facilitate by doing things like this evening. The next talk that we will be having is going to be Professor Bert Roberts, and that will be later in the year, where we originally were looking at September, but the university is hosting a early start conference at the same time, and that's going to be a huge event, so we may push that back a bit further. So we'll keep in contact with you via email and let you know about other opportunities. And finally, I'd like to thank, Aaron's probably in the kitchen, but I'd like to thank the caterers, Bill and James tonight. I'd like to thank Omar Khalifa, who's the CEO of iAccelerate, and his team for all of their support. It's terrific to be able to use this venue, and my team that are here you would have met on the way in. And thanks, and enjoy yourself and one another's company. Good night.